Hey everyone, I just wanted to put together a little video about the homemade dog food that I've humorously called Pup Fud for our dog Stella. She's a sweet little miniature dachshund, a very energetic puppy. Well, she's not really a puppy anymore. She's like 16 months now. And I've been making this food for her pretty much as long as we've had her. I had a slightly different version when she was younger. I'll get into that in a minute. It's not hard. It's got pretty healthy ingredients, I think, and she seems to like it a lot. It doesn't take a lot of work to make it, and I think it's good for her health compared to buying pre-made stuff. So if this is of use or interest to anyone else, I hope that it's worth following along to see how we do it. You've basically got half meat and half everything else. The meat can be whatever you want. I usually buy pork or chicken when they're on sale and then throw them in the freezer until it's time. And then I did it a couple of times with beef, but I found that it's fattier, so I tend to avoid that if possible. Otherwise, you need some water for cooking the meat, and there's some frozen spinach, there's some oats and a bit of water, and then you have bananas, carrots, and apples. And if you've got a food processor, then it's helpful, but it's not essential. You can do this and just dice up the veg by hand if you don't have a food processor. When I did this as the puppy version, I had no oats and less of the fruit and veg and more of the meat, because I had read some stuff that suggested puppies need a more energy dense, proteiny, meaty kind of food, and she seemed to do well with that. But really the recipe is very forgiving, and I think you could do whatever you like, and whatever ingredients you have or haven't got, you can substitute things. I did it once with frozen green peas instead of spinach because I didn't have any spinach on hand and she needed the food made. And it turned out that frozen peas make her slightly more gassy than the spinach version, so I don't do that anymore. But, you know, it didn't kill her and it didn't kill us, so life goes on. So I start out with the meat that's been frozen and bought up on sale. I sometimes get like whole boneless pork roast if that's what they've got on sale, and otherwise I usually just get the ground chicken, ground pork, ground beef, and a couple of bricks of frozen spinach. I usually get the pre-shredded spinach because then you can just use it after it's thawed. Dump the meat in the pot. If I was feeling keen, which I did the first few times, I would put oil in the pot and I'd heat it up and I'd brown the meat a bit. Kind of like I was cooking a regular meal for regular people. I kind of found after doing it a few times when I was in a hurry, she didn't particularly seem to care if I browned the meat and deglazed the pot. So the lazy version is that you throw the meat in the pot and you put in maybe 2 cups of water and you put the lid on and you just boil it. Which kind of makes me feel like I'm on a 18th century Navy boat making boiled meat dinner, kind of. But anyway, it works. Once that's boiling or heating up, you dump a couple of cups of oats in a big pan, pot, bowl thing. Add some water and then dump in your thawed spinach. And then once that's set aside and ready, you get your other ingredients out, which is the 2 bananas, 3 carrots, 4 apples approximately, based on size and whatever you got. You want to peel carrots and then chunk them up. Toss them in the food processor, mulch them into fairly fine pieces, and then dump that on top of your bowl full of stuff. And you basically repeat the exercise with your apples, quarter them into the food processor, zap them up, and then do the same thing with your bananas, peel, mulch, throw them in, and mix everything fairly evenly. By the time you get to this point, the water should have been fully soaked up by the oats. Since I only put 2 cups of hot water on the oats, it's not sufficiently soaked with water at this stage, but we've got extra water coming from the meat pot, and that will take care of the water balance later. So at this point we have all the ingredients except the meat, and the meat cooking water are here. I normally split it across 2 bowls because one bowl is just not big enough. And then once I've split it across, I let the meat finish cooking, which takes a little while, maybe 30 to 60 minutes, depending on how hot you turn it up, whether you're in a hurry, whether you're going to stir it much or not, and things like that. It really doesn't matter. You basically want to make sure that the meat is fully cooked through, and it'll look kind of like this when you're done. Normally at this point I'd use the lid as a gentle strainer, and I just drain off as much of the liquid as I conveniently can, you don't have to be precise, into the two different bowls of the other ingredients, and then you mix those up and let it sit. And then I return the pot to the stove, and then just using a rigid wooden spoon, you kind of smush up the meat so that the pieces aren't terribly large. The meat kind of cooks into lumps if it's just ground beef or ground pork or turkey or chicken, and so you just sort of chop it up using your rigid wooden spoon until the pieces are fairly small. Then you just dump it into the bowls as more or less evenly as you think is suitable, and then you mix it all together so you end up with a kind of a stew of all the meat and veg and the oats and everything. And at this point we're basically ready to proceed on to packaging. I normally just use half a dozen, or in this case I think I've got 7 leftover containers from takeaway dinners. So you use whatever kind of packaging you like. You could subdivide it however you want. I mussed around with ice cube trays and muffin tins for the first while. Then I realized it was a complete and utter waste of time, and it was simpler just to freeze it in big portions. And I use a scale to weigh out. Stella eats about 130 grams twice a day is her meal allotment. That seems to keep her healthy and happy and lean and not putting on weight. So then we package it up, and when I'm partway through the packaging, she does some quality control work on the first empty bowl to make sure that my composition was okay and that the quality was good. Once I'm finished, I label all the containers very carefully so they can be easily identified, and then they go into the freezer, and then Stella finishes with the cleanup. The whole process doesn't take a lot of actual work. It's more a matter of remembering to pick up the ingredients when you're at the grocery store buying other stuff, and then tossing the on sale meat into the freezer. I tend to do this every 2 or 3 weeks for her, is about how long the batch lasts. And I hope you enjoy this and that your dog enjoys pup food as much as Stella does. Thanks for watching.